afternoon, everyone. It is 2 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and get started because I want to make sure that we have time, and I want to introduce our guest speaker here. So it's good to see some of you. I haven't been on Healthy at Home in a while. It's good to see some of your familiar faces. Glad you joined us today. My name is Paige Corley. I'm a health educator here with Salt Lake County, and our guest is Melissa Mauchley. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Melissa. Melissa is a health educator and social worker at the University of Utah. She meets with patients and caregivers, providing health and disease education, advanced care planning, counseling, resources, and support in individual and family settings. She also facilitates support groups and teaches dementia education classes to family and professional caregivers in the community. She graduated from the University of Utah with her Master's of Social Work in 2018. Currently, she works in the University of Utah's Cognitive Neurology Clinic and is a field instructor for the College of Social Work. She is a member of the State of Utah's Coordinating Council for Alzheimer's Disease and Related Dementia, and supported and empowered family caregivers. That's a mouthful, but it's wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. And I'm going to go ahead. I wanted to let you all know, as Melissa's presenting, if you have a question, she has said that you can absolutely either unmute and ask that question right then, or you can put it in the chat and I will ask. And then at the end, of course, we could have a little bit of a Q&A. And otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to you, Melissa. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Paige. I appreciate that introduction. I was kind of teasing her beforehand and saying, yeah, you can kind of skip that. It's all right. And she said, no, these are important things. And it's true. They are important things. Happy to share what I've learned a little bit with you. I appreciate all of you being here today. And what I'm going to do is share my screen and go through some information with you. And yes, just like Paige said, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt, feel free to pause, feel free to ask me. That is what I would like, and that is okay. So give me 1 second here to get my ducks in a row. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. I can't see myself anymore, but that's all right because I just want to see the screen and have a chance to share this anyway. So Paige, if you happen to see anything at this point, let me know. But we'll go ahead and just dive in.
It looks good.
Okay, so healthy brain aging, that's my topic today. Let's talk a little bit about aging. So yes, on the outside, we can see changes to our bodies, right? We can see maybe wrinkles. We can maybe feel pain in our joints. We can see our hair maybe changing colors, and on our faces, maybe some additional wrinkles and things like that. And also inside, our brains are changing as well. Our brains are going through changes as part of the normal aging process. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. What are typical changes that our brains experience as we age? Well, in our 30s and 40s, our brains start shrinking. That is typical. Some areas of the brain shrink more and faster than others. The prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, and the hippocampus are 3 areas that typically go through this change, maybe more and faster than other parts of the brain. And these are key areas that have important functions with memory, language, emotions, and coordination. Other changes. Sometimes the communication between neurons, between nerve cells, may not be as effective. Blood flow in the brain may decrease, and inflammation in the brain may increase by such things as diabetes or poor circulation, chronic stress. These are things that can impact the inflammation going on. and may increase it. So those are changes, but how does it look? What are the effects of typical aging? Well, if you've ever noticed some of these, maybe it affects how we remember things. Maybe it affects our memory. Maybe there's difficulty learning new information. These are typical. Difficulty problem solving in the ways that we used to, or thinking maybe outside the box to solve a current issue. Planning and organizing, maybe having more difficulty doing that. Making decisions, or maybe feeling overwhelmed by decisions. And coordinating movement, maybe having issues with balance. These are all typical changes, typical effects of the changes going on in our brains. So what makes these changes normal versus not normal? Because there are some changes that we would consider not normal. And so what's the difference? Well, the difference is in 3 key areas. And the first one is frequency. How often are you noticing these changes? How often are they impacting you? Is it a change from past functioning? So is this a change for that individual? Some individuals maybe haven't, maybe their whole life they've struggled to remember names. And now as they get older, they continue to struggle. Well, that's not a change for them. But if it's a change from your past abilities, then we would consider that maybe, that's something to take note of. And then how much are these changes impacting your ability in your daily world? What's the impact on daily functioning? So to kind of elaborate on this, when we talk about changes in cognition, and cognition just means thinking, changes in our thinking. So I want to break this down and kind of give you some examples of what's normal, what we would consider mild cognitive impairment, and I'll go over more of what that means. And then also dementia, which I know that word can be scary for some individuals, and it can also, carry a lot of weight with it, but we'll talk about that too. But let's start with normal aging, okay? So sometimes you forget names or appointments, but you remember later. Maybe you make occasional errors when managing your finances or bills. Maybe you forget to pay a bill occasionally. Maybe you get confused about the day of the week, but you figure it out later. Maybe sometimes you have trouble finding the right word. And maybe sometimes you misplace things from time to time, but you can retrace your steps to find them. This is what normal aging and normal changes in cognition look like for normal aging. So, mild cognitive impairment is when these changes go beyond what we expect to see, but they're not significant enough to interfere severely with the day-to-day life and with usual activities. Mild cognitive impairment sometimes can progress to dementia, but it doesn't always. And sometimes if we if we can do assessments and figure out what's causing mild cognitive impairment, sometimes that we can even improve it for individuals. For example, sometimes there are medications that can cause mild cognitive impairment. Sometimes there's deficiencies in vitamins, such as vitamin B12. Sometimes people have issues with hormones or thyroid that can cause changes in memory. So these are all important things to rule out. And if we can make adjustments, we might even be able to improve memory or improve cognition. That being said, for some people, this is a stepping stone, or it is a part of a progression for dementia. However, I want to point out it's not a stage of normal aging. Dementia is not a part of normal aging. Dementia is rarely caused by a single factor. In fact, most often it's caused from a multiple of factors. The greatest risk factor for dementia is something that none of us can change, and that's aging, which is what we're talking about and how to do this in the healthiest way, right? But let me give you just some figures about dementia, and you can see what I'm talking about, and that it's not a part of normal aging. In our US population, for those individuals between 65 and 74, 5% of that population is impacted by dementia. Between the ages of 75 to 84, 13% is impacted and living with a dementia. And ages 85 or older, it's 33%. So that means 67% at ages 85 and older are not living with dementia. So you can see it's not a part of normal aging, right? And yet the numbers do go up with aging. So that's one of the factors. It's one of those factors. But again, it's not the only factor. Dementia is when these changes in cognition that I've gone over, it's when they start to significantly interfere with day-to-day life. When someone needs more and more help, when they are more and more dependent upon others to function in their daily world. So that's what a little overview of what dementia is and what it's not. Our best offense against even our normal cognitive decline, which is part of normal aging, and also the best defense against dementia is a healthy lifestyle. In fact, there's research that suggests that if we address lifestyle factors, we might be able to prevent or delay up to 40% of all dementia cases. That's a pretty significant number. And that is something, a healthy lifestyle, is something that we do have more control over, right? Maybe we don't have control over aging, but we might have more control over our lifestyle and in incorporating a healthy lifestyle. So let me talk a little bit about that. But before I do, I always like to show this picture. Before I start jumping into, risk factors and lifestyle recommendations, I always like to acknowledge that sometimes I know people are thinking, well, you can't teach this old dog new tricks, right? I'm where I'm at this age, and it is what it is. And yet, I'm going to say that contrary to that old saying, there is growing evidence to show that, yes, at any age, we can learn new things, and we can learn throughout our lives. Our understanding of our brain's elasticity, meaning the way the brain can be flexible, the way it can create or reroute neural connections to adapt to the challenges and to new tasks, even despite what the brain is experiencing. The brain, each of our brains has a cognitive reserve, and we can learn new things. We can learn new ways. And so if you catch yourself, as I go through some of these next few slides, and maybe you catch yourself thinking, I can't do that, or I've tried that, that doesn't work, I would encourage you to maybe turn that upside down and maybe instead think, I'd like to try that, or maybe I could try that again, or I wonder how I could do that. So maybe exploring the possibility of it happening instead of thinking, I can't. So that's just a suggestion as we go through these next few slides. Many of these things are things we've heard before because they impact our hearts, and heart health impacts our brain health. Our brains make up only 2% of our body's weight, but it consumes 20% of the body's oxygen and energy supplies. A healthy heart ensures that enough blood is pumped to the brain, and healthy blood vessels enable oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to reach the brain, so it can function normally. So let's talk about some risk factors then for heart disease, and that they're also risk factors for dementia. High blood pressure and hypertension. High blood pressure damages the lining of the arteries and makes them more susceptible to the buildup of plaque, which narrows the arteries leading to the heart and to the brain. Smoking. Smoking is a risk factor for heart disease because it lowers our good cholesterol. It makes blood sticky and more likely to clot, which can block blood flow to our heart and to our brain. Smoking increases the buildup of plaque, which plaque is made up of fat, cholesterol, calcium, other substances in our blood vessels. And it also causes thickening and narrowing of blood vessels. Diabetes. In the United States, nearly 74% of adults are overweight or have obesity, and that increases the risk of heart disease and also stroke. And then high cholesterol. Excess cholesterol can build up in the walls of the arteries, and that limits blood flow to our brain, our heart, our kidneys, and other organs. Adults with diabetes are twice as likely to have heart disease and stroke as people who do not have diabetes. And again, over time, as we talk about those things, high blood pressure, smoking, diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, over time they can damage blood vessels and block blood flow. So all of these things, of course, impact our hearts and also impact our brains. So there's ways I would encourage all of us for that matter, to stay active. And the first way is to stay physically active. And I break this down into two sections. The first one is why. Why do we stay physically active? Well, because physical activity improves cognitive health. It improves our thinking. It improves our brain. And these are how. These are the ways that it does that. It helps us to think and learn and problem solve. Physical activity can improve memory. It can reduce anxiety and depression, and it can help us sleep. If we're more active during the day, we increase our chances for a more restful sleep at night. You don't have to be a fitness guru to reap the benefits of physical activity. No matter our age or our fitness level, physical activity can help improve our brain health and our quality of life. Any amount of activity can help, and for adults 65 and older, it's recommended for 150 minutes every week of moderately intense physical activity. Now, 150 minutes, right? How to break that down. So this is our how. That could look like 30 minutes on 5 days a week, but that's just one possible equation, one possible way to do it. But for suggestions, maybe going for a walk, swimming, riding a bike, whether that's indoors or a stationary bike. No, a stationary bike indoors or a bike outdoors, either way. Maybe you play pickleball, racquetball, or another sport. There are groups, there are silver sneakers that's available through insurance companies that can offer discounts for the gym. And there's different groups at rec centers and whatnot and gyms of silver sneakers. So that might be an option. Or maybe joining a yoga or a Pilates group. These are all types of activity to stay active. What are some things maybe that you could incorporate into what you're already doing? Well, if you have a pet, maybe you take the dog for a walk. Maybe you take the stairs instead of the elevator, if possible. Maybe you park further away from entrances. Again, this is if possible. And now I know everyone has their limitations or the access or the abilities to do these things, but these are just some suggestions. Maybe you lift weights or you do squats while watching TV. Maybe you dance. Even just movement. I know recently I did this. I was making dinner one night and turned the music on and just started moving my arms a little bit and dancing. And of course, I have teenagers at home and they were rolling their eyes at me, but that's okay. It made my own emotions improve. I felt lighthearted. So just moving my body in a dance kind of movement was helpful. So that's just an idea. And then the last one is maybe mow the lawn or rake the leaves. The goal is to maybe even have a variety of these things and to have a routine with them. So that might help encourage continued activity with it. There are lots of tips on this website. This is the National Institute on Aging, and they have lots of tips. And yes, they have suggestions and ideas for types of exercise. But when I was looking at it, they also had lots of ideas of how to get started and ways to stay motivated. I know some of us start on something. It's kind of like a New Year's resolution. I'm really gung-ho and I'm really good on, January 1st. And maybe by a few days into it, I start to lose my motivation. So there were some really good ideas about how to stay motivated on this website. They also had suggestions and ideas for exercising with chronic conditions. Maybe if there's issues with pain or joints or arthritis or fatigue. They had some suggestions for that too that I thought were helpful. And then if you want to be one of those individuals that likes to track your steps or track your goals or track improvement, they have lots of suggestions for that too. So this is a good website, and we can make available after this presentation too, I'm sure. So the next way I want to encourage all of us to stay active is with our mental skills. And I like to refer to them as keep sharpening them, right? Keep finding ways to sharpen the mental skills. Mental stimulation can have a great effect on our everyday cognitive functioning and help us build a cognitive reserve. Cognitive functioning, again, that goes back to the way we think. Let me explain a little bit more with that. So when we talk about mental stimulation, it's a workout for our brains. And the skills that we're trying to sharpen in our cognitive functioning are skills such as concentration, attention, memory, information processing, logical thinking, problem solving. There's also spatial awareness, depth perception, there's calculation, there's all types of mental stimulation. So those are examples of what kind of cognitive functioning I'm referring to. As I speak about a cognitive reserve, let me tell you what I mean by that. A cognitive reserve refers to the brain's ability to be flexible with its networks of neurons. The greater our brain's cognitive reserve, the greater it can carry out cognitive tasks, despite brain changes. Each of our reserves can compensate and reroute around changes going on in the brain. It helps us to do that. And our cognitive reserve is built up by our mental stimulation and by the workouts that we do for our brains. So the more that we do activities in concentration, attention, memory, and so forth, the more we're building our cognitive reserve, which then can help us down the road as we try to increase its flexibility to adapt to normal aging. So that was the why. Now, how do we do that? What are some suggestions? So some suggestions are take daily time to work on a jigsaw or a crossword puzzle. And it could be other puzzles too. Maybe it's a word search or something of that nature, but something that keeps the brain active but doesn't cause too much stress. So if you've never done a jigsaw puzzle before, maybe don't start at 1,000 pieces. Start with fewer pieces and maybe build up to that if you'd like. But taking time to work on it daily and having it part of the routine, of your daily routine, can be helpful. Do math problems. I know down at the dollar store near my house, there are books that you can buy for that have math problems in it. So if that's something that you enjoy doing calculations, or if that's something that you think would be helpful and that would resonate with you, that's a suggestion to do some of those every day. Continue reading. Maybe join or even start your own book club. We know that reading as we age can be impacted, and sometimes it's because of our ability to comprehend. Sometimes it's because we have changes in vision. So there are ways that we can work with that. Maybe we don't read novels anymore. Maybe we adapt and read more such things as magazines or short articles or short stories. Maybe we listen to an audiobook instead of reading the language. So there are ways that we can adapt so that people can continue reading, and that's what I would encourage each of us to do, is to find ways to continue to do it and adapt if we can. Playing games like bridge, bingo, chess, maybe playing Monopoly, Uno, things with family, things with friends. Games can be a way to stimulate the brain. Here's one that sometimes older adults don't think of, but playing video games on a computer, on a tablet or phone. I know sometimes we talk about the younger generation and video games, but it is something we encourage older adults to do as well, if that's something that you enjoy. And there's many types of video games out there. I know that on the AARP website, they have many brain games. But also if you have a tablet or if you have an iPad, there's many games on there too that can be enjoyable, including things like solitaire or other things. One of the keys with games is sometimes people, if they like a game, they might play that particular game over and over, which is okay. And yet I would encourage you to, if you have a favorite game, to maybe add to it also and play other ones as well. Because if you get so good at a particular game, the brain doesn't always have to stay sharp to continue to play it. So it's always good to maybe add something to a favorite game as well. Another suggestion is to take up a new interest or a new hobby. Maybe it's woodworking. Maybe it's learning how to, learning a craft, or and taking up maybe bird watching or joining a group of hikers. Taking up a new interest or hobby can be really good at keeping the brain learning and engaged. Taking a class at the senior center or at one of the local colleges or universities. I know up here at the University of Utah and also at Salt Lake Community College, they offer free classes. They offer classes at discounts for seniors. So that might be something. And then at the senior centers, at your local senior center, there are many different types of classes, computer classes, or again, classes about particular topics, classes about hobbies. So that might be something as well. Creating and using art is a way to keep the brain engaged. Maybe you want to try painting, or maybe just drawing or doodling even. Making crafts, doing pottery. These are types of things that, again, if it's something you enjoy, fantastic, continue doing it. But it might also be something that's new, and might be something that you might try to do. I know for most of us, I'll just say this as well, when we learn something new or we're trying to learn something new, we sometimes feel apprehensive or we sometimes feel awkward. That's normal. It's normal to feel awkward at something that you're learning because it is new to you. So as you're learning maybe a new hobby or you're trying to work with art and do something, hopefully you allow yourself some kindness as you're learning and just some space to learn and to know that, yeah, this is supposed to be awkward. It's okay. As I learn and grow, maybe I can continue to develop this skill, and then it won't be as awkward or as uncomfortable. But getting through that stage will be helpful. Learning a new language, that's something that people sometimes do. And again, the goal is to have a variety of these things. So maybe don't just pick one thing, but maybe pick a few things to try. But it's okay to start with one and build from there. One of the last ways I encourage you to stay active is to strengthen your social connections. And our why for this is because we know that social isolation and loneliness can be detrimental for the health of our brains. Social isolation, sorry, I'm having a hard time getting that out. Social isolation is linked to depression and higher risk for dementia. If a person is alone most of the time and has less social activity, it can contribute to a decline in their ability to perform everyday tasks, such as driving, paying bills, managing their medications, and cooking. So these are all things that can impact our brain, and so not just our emotional health, right, but also the way our brains function. So here's some suggestions of maybe how to strengthen social connections. Maybe it's something like running errands or going shopping with a family member, with a neighbor or friend. Maybe as you look over your calendar for the month, maybe you might try to add a social activity to your calendar. You can find many different community activities there's community calendars, even your local library has calendars. So maybe you might challenge yourself to look through one of those and to add one new thing to your calendar. Volunteering. This can be a good way to maybe get involved with a meaningful cause, something that you find important and valuable, and then meeting with other people who share that same purpose, that same drive, but having a chance to interact with people there. Again, back to our local senior centers, they can be very helpful in staying socially connected, whether it's classes or going down for lunch, different activities or events that they might sponsor, going out with a friend, just enjoying a movie, going to lunch, or maybe a walk in your neighborhood. Visiting with family and friends over video chat, some such things like Zoom, that can be helpful. Some people use their iPhones or their tablets, and even just phone calls, right? If you have family that live at a distance and that you maybe don't get to see as often, this can be a great way to stay connected with them. And maybe you're thinking, yeah, that would be great if they would call me, right? And I know that's something that many of our older adults experience is that they wish family and friends would call them more often. And I would hope that too for each of us in our worlds. And yet if that doesn't happen, it's okay to also initiate the call. Maybe you want to set up a schedule that maybe every Thursday or every Sunday afternoon, you reach out to a particular family member or to a friend and have that type of connection. I know of some grandparents, if you have grandchildren, who will read stories to their grandchildren over video chat or over things like Zoom. So that's a way to continue that. Maybe you want to travel. You could talk to a travel agent or even look online for groups that travel. Maybe you want to take an organized group or do a travel of even here local or at a distance. There are many ways that you can travel in groups. Attending religious services might be appropriate and helpful for some individuals and a way to connect and to even find a deeper purpose. And then I do want to point this out. This is a relatively, apologize for that, a relatively new program, but at the Institute on Aging, they have what's called this friendship line. And you can see the number there on the screen. But there are volunteers there that you can call 24/7 and just have a chance to talk with someone. It's a time that there doesn't have to be any particular purpose. There doesn't have to be a crisis. It doesn't have to be anything of dire need. It's just maybe you have want to have a chance to connect, have a chance to talk to someone, have a chance to hear someone's voice and to share your ideas with them as well. So that you can call them 24/7, and you can also call them and request to have someone call you on a regular basis. So maybe you wanted to call and ask them to have someone call you on Monday afternoons. You could set that up. So I think this is a great program to help our older adults who are sometimes isolated because of maybe can no longer drive, or there's health issues, or they're caregiving for someone in their family. This is a good program that I appreciate that we're trying to help. We're trying to do what we can to alleviate loneliness. So this is a good thing to maybe share with others too. So those are the ways to stay active. There are some additional lifestyle recommendations that I do want to touch on. The first one talks about diet. I would encourage all of us to have a heart-healthy diet, which of course impacts the health of our brains. I would encourage all of us to have more fruits and vegetables, nuts, whole grains, chicken, fish, legumes, And of course, this is if you don't have dietary restrictions and if you're not already following a plan. These are things I would encourage us all to have more of. And then to incorporate healthy fats such as olive oil and limit saturated fats, things such as red meat and sugar. So again, just reducing those if we can. There are some examples of heart-healthy diets. The one that I often recommend here in our clinic is called the Mediterranean diet, but I also know there's one called DASH. And these are, again, heart healthy. They're good for the brain. They're good for the heart. So those are things that you can look into, but they all promote those things that we've gone over with those highlighted things like fruits and vegetables, legumes, leafy greens, beans, things of that nature. The next area is sleep. I know sleep can be a big issue for many of us. The goal is to get restful sleep, and that looks like 7 to 9 hours a night if we can. If we can't, or if we're struggling with that, some suggestions are maybe following a regular sleep schedule. So maybe the same time that you try to maintain the same time you go to bed at night and the same time that you wake in the mornings. Developing and maintaining a bedtime routine. Are there things that we can do as part of the routine to help promote sleep? Maybe it's that we read, or maybe we listen to music. Maybe we can take a warm shower. Sometimes people will do meditations. Those are some things that can be a part of a routine. In addition to that, keeping our rooms at a comfortable temperature will be helpful. Using low lighting in the evenings. So even before it's time to go to bed, maybe even an hour before or 2 hours before, maybe use a lamp instead of overhead lighting or something like that. That can signal to the body that it's time to maybe move into a restful space. I would also encourage all of us to avoid eating large meals close to bedtime, which can impact our digestive systems and impact our sleep. And then stay away from caffeine later in the day. I've seen different recommendations for the timing of that, but most things I've seen say try to avoid caffeine after even 2 p.m. because that can affect your sleep at night. Also, it's important to know about our mood and how that can impact our brains, how that impacts our day-to-day, and especially understanding and knowing the signs of depression. So as I go through this and go through some of these things to be aware of, know that each of us, our moods can fluctuate. And different things can trigger different emotions, and that's normal. As I go through some of these signs, if you notice any of these things in yourself or in someone else for 2 weeks or longer, that may let you know that there's depression present. So it's not normal fluctuating. It's if these things are present more often than not, and over a week of 2 weeks or longer. So the first one, this top one, feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, or worthlessness. The next, lack of energy, feeling fatigued, irritability, pessimism, a loss of interest in activities that you normally find enjoyable, difficulty concentrating or remembering, trouble sleeping, appetite loss or overeating, and maybe some aches and pains that don't go away that you didn't have previously. Now, I know there are some chronic things that, of course, we might experience, but these are some that maybe come on suddenly that you've researched and maybe had other things ruled out, but they continue. These are all signs that maybe an individual is experiencing depression, which is very, very real. It can be very significant. And it's something that I would encourage each of us to look into if we saw these signs. And I would start by talking to your doctor. There are things that maybe, if you're having issues with some of these things, we can talk about that. And there's types of therapies, whether it's counseling and doing talk therapy, maybe it's talking about sleep, maybe it's talking about your thoughts and how that's impacting your feelings and your emotions. Maybe there's difficult circumstances in your life that you would be helpful to talk about or to get some suggestions for. But I would start by talking to your doctor and then moving into some next steps after that. So going back to before, talking about healthy lifestyles, these are some things that we've gone over. We've talked about, some ways to stay active. We've talked about some risk factors and also some things to try to promote in our everyday life to help with this. And just a reminder, a healthy lifestyle is our best offense against normal cognitive decline, which all of us will experience because all of us are aging. So this is our healthy lifestyle is our best offense against that. And it's also our best defense against dementia. And with that, I didn't have anybody pause me along the way, but I just want to open it up to see if anyone does have any questions. I will stop sharing my screen. There we go. For those of you that are online, does anyone have any questions about what we went over today or anything maybe that I didn't touch on?
You're welcome to unmute yourself and just ask. Melissa, I did have a comment. I wanted to say something about, you mentioned in learning the frustration that you have in learning and how, you got to persevere and get through that. And that's one of the points that I try to give to people, but of course I'm dealing with older adult people. So the older adults that I'm working with, especially when it comes to the computer, sometimes I find that people are so frustrated and they're like, oh, just forget it, or I'm dumb, or I can't learn this. And I think we forget that learning is frustrating. That's why none of us want to do it. But I think that's when the neural pathways are being reinforced and our brains are becoming healthier. So there's that growth in that frustration. And that makes me feel better just because I'm going back to school and I've been feeling that frustration.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And the goal is balance with that. We don't want to stress ourselves out, too much, right? Because that can cause more issues with our brain if we're in this continual state of stress. However, understanding that portions of stress and managing that stress and coping with that stress is actually healthy as we're learning and going through that path and that process of learning things, because like you mentioned, that's when the brain is making new connections, making new pathways, and it's part of the process. So there's a balance. It's okay to feel stress. It's what do we do with the stress? And that's something that I didn't necessarily delve into, but it's a very good topic. All of us have stress, right? The goal in life isn't to necessarily remove all of stress because that might be impossible. But what do we do with stress? How do we respond to it? How do we react? Or what are healthy ways to move through stress? So we can touch on that. There are different, deep breathing is something I often recommend for individuals. Just taking an intentional pause and to just breathe. And sometimes it requires more than one breath. Sometimes you maybe want to take 5 or 10 breaths because that helps to slow our heart rate. That helps to lower our blood pressure. It helps connect us and start our relaxation response. Breathing is very, of course we take it for granted. We all breathe, but if you've ever noticed, if you're feeling stressed, sometimes, in fact, many times, our breathing will become shallow. We have shortness of breath and we're not getting enough oxygen. We're not getting enough blood flow. So if we can recognize that we're feeling stressed and in our bodies, notice that can be a way to help us, which can then help us in those moments of learning or help us in those moments of other stressful times in our lives. So managing stress is an important key in all of this too. I'm glad you brought that up. The learning side of it and the awkwardness and the stress. Any other thoughts or questions? I went through my presentation a little bit fast, and so I ended up with a little bit more time than I thought I might have here at the end. So happy to answer any questions.
That is okay. You did great. I love the programs that talk about this. I don't think we can hear enough about how much control we do have over the progression of our bodies and our aging. You mentioned one thing about volunteering. Hey, we're always saying we need volunteers. Come on, teach AFEP, teach enhanced fitness. It's good for you. No, but we have a lot of volunteer opportunities, and that's one of the things our volunteers say is they feel more connected to people. They have something that they're doing, and it's not a new job. It's not a 20-hour-a-week job. This is once a week for 6 weeks or something along those lines. So I appreciate all the tips that you gave. They are very applicable and relevant and hopeful, I think. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Anybody else? Does Robin, are you just unmute?
If somebody is already starting to show signs of dementia, can it be reversed?
That's a really good question. And I would say it depends on what's causing the signs. It's what's causing the symptoms. If it is a dementia, we know that dementia itself is like, if it's being caused by a neurodegenerative disease, that would not be reversible. However, some things like depression, like medication, might cause a pseudo type dementia symptoms. And so we'd want to rule those out first. There are, again, maybe it's a vitamin B12 issue. So there are some things that cause dementia type symptoms but aren't really a dementia. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we want to rule that out. However, if it is a dementia and it's being caused by something like a vascular dementia or an Alzheimer's disease, those are not reversible. However, there are things that we can do to try to help. We can try to help them stay active physically and socially and mentally, and that can help with how they might experience dementia. Does that make sense? Every individual will experience it differently because of the strengths that they have, because of the environment that they might live in.
Oh,
Lost her.
am I the only one that can't hear her anymore?
Can't hear her.
Melissa, we can't hear you. Oh, yeah.
I tell people to reach out to me. So if you do have questions about that, talk to Paige.
Okay.
Do that,
Now
and she can connect you to resources. Because there are many resources and helps and tips for an individual and for caregivers, for families. There are many things out there that we can do.
Melissa, you bring that up. We are offering a Dementia Dialogues class. Oh gosh. It might be, if you're interested in one of our Dementia Dialogues classes, please email me. I'm going to put it in my in the chat real quick. Because it's a really good class for caregivers.
Absolutely.
And I just can't remember exactly where. Did it go in there?
I believe I saw it.
Yeah. I'm going to put it in one more time just in case because I can't see it. Please get in touch with me if you want any context or resources. If you want to get in touch with Melissa, like she said, I can definitely connect you. Or if you have specific questions a little bit deeper, we're happy to facilitate. That is why we're here, is to try to help facilitate your understanding of this issue. So,
thank you for asking your question. Thank you. Happy to answer any others.
Lorraine, you got something?
I've just got one thing to add. Maybe this is well known, but Salt Lake County, through the senior centers, has a program for volunteers to write letters against isolation. And someone can volunteer to write a letter to somebody who maybe is in a nursing home or something like that, and they never get mail. And it was started a few years ago, and there's no big time commitment. You can just write a letter, and the senior center delivers it to the nursing homes. And I think it's good for me to write these things, because I used to people I used to write to have all died. So I used to write a lot of letters. So I write, however many letters I want, bring to the senior center, and they distribute them. And I've heard that people who don't have had no one to visit them or get mail really enjoy that. So that's one thing about kind of getting some social interaction going on.
Absolutely. I love that idea. I think that's great. I think that's really good. And you're right. People that maybe that are in a care center or might be more isolated, may not have as and different family dynamics, different circumstances might impact that, of course. But for someone like yourself that's enjoyed writing, what a great way to continue writing. And on the other side of it, for the person to receive that, I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, look at Salt Lake County Senior Centers. Wow, who would have thought? We're so awesome. I didn't know about that program, Lorraine. That's a great program. And then we also have a volunteer for wellness calls. If you can volunteer to just call somebody and have a conversation, if you're one of those people who enjoys talking on the phone, you get a certain amount of people that you call. And I think like Lorraine's and Melissa, you would probably agree, it's not just benefiting the recipient, it's benefiting the person who's doing it, right?
Absolutely.
I make cards, I do crafts, and I always say I do this selfishly. I'm glad you like it, but I'm really making you a birthday card for me because it makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an okay way to be selfish, right? Because you're really giving to others.
Absolutely. Well, and you're connecting to your own creativity, writing and art, and you're generating energy, which then comes from in yourself. You're sharing it with others. Yeah, absolutely.
All good stuff.
All good things. All good.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much, and thank you for the communication afterwards, everybody. Thank you for your questions. This will be on our YouTube channel. Next week, we are going to be doing a plastic-free June on July 11th. Plastic-free July. Sorry, next month's July. Erica, my coworker, Erica, she's going to be doing a presentation on how we can be plastic-free in July. So join us then. We'll send out reminders. Melissa, thank you again for being here. I enjoyed talking with you before the presentation, and I very much enjoyed your presentation. Hope you'll come back and do another one with us at some point.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.